Welcome back to NewsWire. So the NHL calendar is very interesting, and in fact, we're seeing a report this morning from one of the insiders who covers the NHL that there could be a potential change in schedule, an 84-game schedule, wrapping up the finals before June, because just so much happens in the NHL so quickly. I mean, the NBA, it happens fast, but as we bring in Mike Mazzeo, the NHL, I mean, this is like super fast. You win a championship, a team is having a parade. In the interim, before the parade, there's even a draft. They had the draft. People forgot about that this past week. And as soon as that's over, you have free agency too. Dare I say it's faster as far as the transactional period than it is in the National Basketball Association. And because of that, Gary Bettman is forced to the podium. Leads me to all of that. And Mike, aside from the potential change in schedule story, the big story coming out of the draft wasn't the draft as much as it was Gary Bettman talking about sports betting and some of these scandals that have been going on. What did you learn from watching that? And I guess long way of saying thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Craig. Great time here with NBA and NHL free agency. Transactions going wild. One of the most fun times of the year, I think, at least for myself. Thankfully, don't have to report on all the transactions, but just watching it as a fan is spectacular. So to get to the NHL story, Gary Bettman talked to CNBC right before the NHL draft, which of course, ironically, was held in Las Vegas at the Sphere. We know how much the NHL, like the other leagues, has embraced gambling. We see the Las Vegas Golden Knights win a Stanley Cup and move to Vegas. And so you see, Circa and the Blackhawks. Circa is going to be on the Blackhawks uniforms. This is a league like the others that has embraced sports betting. And then with that, there's obviously been a ton of scandals. Bettman saying, like the other owners and commissioners, as a result of legal betting, we're able to monitor this stuff better. So when Shane Pinto is suspended for 41 games, and we unfortunately still don't know exactly why due to the NHLPA negotiated settlement, at least, we know that he did not bet on hockey, as Bettman reiterated. That is an absolute no-no for players, staff, front office, any sort of, organization people. But he did apparently, according to Bettman, not adhere to rules that the sports books have in place. And we know that there's been reporting from the Canadian press about a third party potentially being involved in this. So I asked an NHL spokesperson, what exactly, is there a list or something like that? And they just said, you can't bet on hockey, and, whether it was something with a sports book account or something like that, I don't know. But, Bettman is happy with where things are. He said the education programs are in place to hopefully not have this happen again. Like the other leagues, you hope that that's the case and that these players know not to do this stuff. We know in baseball, it's posted all over the clubhouse. But yet, if you have one guy doing it, it makes everybody else look bad. And if that guy is a franchise player, thankfully it wasn't Ohtani. But if it is that kind of player, or it's a team-wide thing, this whole industry could come crashing down. So they can't afford to have that happen. You hope that Pinto learned his lesson. Seems like he's going to now maybe leave Ottawa, according to Pierre LeBrun. He might get out of it, get a trade. So that was a hot story involving a player that is involved in gambling infractions, unfortunately. And so, this is a storyline that isn't going anywhere, and you hope the leagues have cleaned it up and you don't have that major scandal that could take this whole industry down.
Yeah, and again, whether it's a marquee player or a role player, it simply doesn't matter. We're talking about it, and because we're talking about it, it's a subject. And Bettman's forced to address it, as is the commissioners of the NBA, the NHL, and the NFL as well. All right, so sports betting in California. That's the topic for our next discussion here, Mike. And, certainly a lot of what's going on in California is trying to emulate or mimic what happened in Florida, which is the Seminole tribe took over sports betting and now have exclusivity for a number of years. It just doesn't seem it's that simple in California, Mike, where I'm sure the tribes would love to have it, but there's a lot that's going to have to happen before this gets legalized.
Right, Craig. So there was the Florida sports betting ruling where West Flagler's challenge was turned down by the Supreme Court. They decided they would not take this case. And so there's a question of, okay, now that this Seminole model is in place for 30 years, is this hub and spoke model something that other states can emulate? And everyone obviously looks at California because if it legalizes, eventually it could be the number 1 sports betting market in the country. And there was a financial analyst who said, okay, because of this ruling, it seems like Florida can just California can just change its compact and not have to go to the ballot initiative. So not have the public vote on it. They can just amend the compact, and that'll give sports betting to California. But I talked to a tribal attorney, Scott Crowell, who has been with the tribes doing gaming for decades, and he said that's not the case. I also talked to an industry source who reiterated the same thing, that there's no real shortcuts here. They're still going to have all parties moving in the same direction. It's not going to be FanDuel and DraftKings versus the tribes. It's going to be tribal-led, and then you hope that all the operators get on board. The major politicians like Governor Newsom, who have a very good relationship with the tribes, everybody pulling in the same direction, and then you still have to turn a public that voted 82% no on this Proposition 27 in 2022, which would legalize online sports betting. So there's a lot of moving parts here. The tribes with 110. You've got the big tribes, the small tribes, the major gaming tribes, tribes that get the revenue sharing from gaming, that don't participate. They're in rural areas. There's a lot of parties that need to get on the same page, or at least most of them need to get on the same page. And so I think we're miles away. James Siva of CNIGA, the chair, said on a recent podcast with Victor Rocha that he would not commit to 2026 for California sports betting at this point. That's obviously the next time they could get something done. So I think there's a lot here. You hope that California sports betting gets done, but the steps still need to, fall into place as they would have before this ruling in Florida.
Yeah, I would agree, and I don't think that any two states are the same. And we've seen this play out all over the country when states get legalized. It's not like two states do it at once. There's just a lot that goes into the requirement there. All right, speaking of another state, let's head over to Massachusetts and talk about the latest for Bally Bet. Last week on the show, Mike, we had, of course, some guest contributors from Legal Sports Report talking about how Bally Bet's launch in July seems to be delayed. And look, there's some serious questions, I think, just generally speaking, about some of these operators that are not named, FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM. Is Bally Bet one of those that we have to wonder what the future lies at this point?
Yeah, Craig, so I agree with you. I think, Bally Bet actually, our Sam McQuillan is on that Massachusetts meeting. Just minutes ago, Bally Bet was approved and will launch in Massachusetts tomorrow. So that update is here. Bally Bet's the seventh operator in Massachusetts, joins DraftKings, FanDuel, the legacy casinos, MGM, Caesars, and then the newcomers, Fanatics and ESPN Bet. Yeah, Bally Bet just really hasn't done much in other states, barely 1% to less than 1% market share and revenue share in the other handful of states it's in. In New York, it has not done well. It had rebranded its app and kind of updated its app. That kept it out of Massachusetts for. This Massachusetts market's been open for 16 months already. So the other operators have had a head start. We've seen DraftKings and FanDuel pretty much dominate in every state with around 70 to 80% market share and handle share. So yeah, I think they're behind the eight ball. Certainly their investors have talked about get out of this. Soo Kim, their CEO chairman, has said it's good we're offering this. We're maybe more of a casino brand, but it's good that we can offer this to our customers. So I guess that's the way they're looking at it. I don't expect them to make much of a dent. They have the, deal with Diamond. That seems like FanDuel is going to take that over. That transaction's pending. But yeah, I mean, what's the future for Bally Bet? It doesn't seem that great, but they're going to take a shot here in Massachusetts, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, getting a small piece of the market share is better than getting none, I guess. It just comes down to the amount of money they have to advertise and give out some promo dollars to acquire some of those people who have not yet signed up to bet on sports. Mike, great to catch up with you here on NewsWire. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for coming into the studio.
Thank you.